Fire gets all the credit, and fire is not what kept people alive through a plains winter. A fire warms one side of you and lets the other side freeze. It burns out at 3 in the morning. It cannot be carried while you walk, and it cannot follow you into your bed. The old ones came through winters at 30 and 40 below in country where the wind never stops, and they did it with something more reliable than flame. My name is Thomas Yazzie. I grew up Dene in the high desert of the Southwest, and most of what I know about cold came from people who treated it as ordinary knowledge rather than survival technique. Today I am giving you what actually kept people warm when the fire was out, and the last one is the principle underneath every other item on this list. Start with the fact that changes how you think about all of it. You are the heat source, not the fire, not the shelter, not the blanket. Your own body produces somewhere around 100 watts continuously, which is roughly what a bright light bulb puts out, and every single thing that follows is a device for holding on to that. Once you understand that, the question stops being how do I get warm and becomes how do I stop losing what I already make. Those are completely different problems with completely different answers. Heat leaves a body 4 ways, and the old ones addressed every one of them. It leaves by conduction, meaning direct contact with something colder, and the ground is the worst offender there. It leaves by convection, meaning moving air stripping warmth off your skin. It leaves by radiation into open sky, and it leaves by evaporation, meaning sweat, which is the one nobody thinks about and the one that kills people. Now the methods. The first is getting off the ground, and if you take one thing from this video, take this. Earth pulls heat out of a body faster than cold air ever will, because it is in direct contact and because it never stops accepting heat. A person lying on bare winter ground with a blanket over them is losing far more warmth downward than upward, and no amount of covering on top corrects that. The old ones never slept on bare ground. Boughs, dry grass, bark, hides, rush mats, whatever the country offered, and it went underneath before anything went on top. The measure is 4 inches thick after it compresses, not before. It will look like more than any reasonable person needs. Build it anyway, because it settles to a fraction of what you piled. The second is the principle underneath every warm material that has ever existed, which is trapped still air. A hide is not warm. A wool blanket is not warm. Grass is not warm. What makes any of them work is that they hold air in small pockets and stop that air from moving, and still air is one of the poorest conductors of heat there is. That is why fur works with the hairs standing rather than crushed flat, and why a compressed blanket under your hip warms you far less than the same blanket lofted beside you. So the old ones layered rather than piled. Several lighter layers with air between them beat one heavy one every time, and that principle has not changed in 10,000 years. My grandfather never wrote any of this down. Nobody in his generation did, and that's most of the reason I finally put together Walk Easy. Every method laid out with the reasoning underneath it, the same way it was handed to me. It's a small one-time amount, less than a decent tarp, and it replaces a pack full of gear you'd otherwise buy. First link in the description and pinned at the top of the comments. The third is stuffing, and this is the piece most people have never heard. Dry grass, moss, cattail down, shredded bark, and milkweed fluff all went inside clothing. Between an inner and outer layer. Inside moccasins around the foot, packed into the space between a robe and the body. It is the same idea as the down in a modern jacket, made from what was standing within arm's reach. Cattail down, in particular, is remarkable material, light as anything and full of trapped air. The Inuit and other far northern peoples took this furthest with sewn double-layer clothing, an inner layer worn hair side in against the skin, and an outer layer worn hair side out. 2 layers with an air gap between them, which is precisely how modern cold weather clothing is built today. The 4th is the debris nest, which is a shelter built entirely around holding your own heat, with no fire involved at all. You pile dry leaves, grass, and needles into a mound considerably larger than you think you need, then you burrow into it and plug the entrance behind you. The rule is 2 feet of material after compression. Inside, you pack the cavity with more dry leaves until you are wearing them. Built properly, a debris nest keeps a person alive well below freezing with no fire, because it is barely larger than the body inside it, and because 2 feet of dry leaves is nothing but trapped air. That last part matters. A space too large for your body to fill will never warm up, no matter how well insulated. Small and still is the whole principle. The 5th is snow, which sounds backward until you understand what snow actually is. Snow is mostly air. Loose snow is somewhere around 90% air by volume, which makes it a genuinely effective insulator. Peoples across the far north use this deliberately. The inside of a well-built snow shelter with a person inside will hold near freezing, while the outside runs far colder, and near freezing is survivable when the alternative is not. 2 things about snow shelters, and I will not skip either one. Ventilation is not optional, because a sealed snow shelter with a person inside accumulates carbon dioxide, and people have died in well-built ones that had no vent. And never bring a burning stove inside one. The 6th is the earth itself, which is the largest source of free warmth available anywhere. Dig down about 3 feet, and the ground stops caring what the weather is doing. Below the frost line, it holds steady at somewhere around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, warmed slowly from below. You can verify this without going anywhere. Walk into an old root cellar in January and put your hand on a jar. It is not frozen. Plains and plateau peoples built winter dwellings dug 3 to 4 feet into the ground for exactly this reason. On the coldest night of the year, that shelter starts at around 50 degrees before anyone does anything at all. A small fire and a few bodies only have to lift it 15 or 20 degrees further. The fire in those lodges was small precisely because the ground had already done most of the work. The 7th is other people, and it is the oldest method there is. Several bodies in one enclosed space produce a great deal of heat, and winter lodges were built for extended families rather than individuals, for that reason among others. A dozen people in one earth lodge are a dozen 100-watt heaters running continuously. Sleeping arrangements reflected this. Children and elders toward the warmest positions and people sleeping close rather than spread out. The 8th is fuel, meaning what you eat. Your body generates heat by burning calories, and it cannot do that on an empty tank. Somebody cold and underfed cannot warm up regardless of how good their shelter is, because there is nothing to burn. Fat is what matters most here, since it delivers more than twice the energy per weight of anything else, and it burns slowly enough to carry you through a night. That is why the old ones prized fat above lean meat, why pemmican was built around it, and why a hungry man in winter looks for grease rather than protein. Eating something before sleep genuinely helps because your body will be working through the night and it needs something to work with. And the ninth, which is the principle underneath everything above, stay dry. Water conducts heat away from a body roughly 25 times faster than air does. Wet insulation is not insulation at all because the trapped air that made it work has been replaced by water. That applies to rain and snowmelt, and it applies far more often to sweat. Here is the mistake that has killed a great many capable people. Somebody works hard in the cold, gathering wood, breaking trail, digging a shelter. They warm up, they sweat into their clothing, and then they stop moving. That soaked clothing now pulls heat out of them at a rate that dry clothing never would, and their temperature falls faster than it would have if they had never warmed up at all. The old ones understood this completely, and the rule was to never let yourself sweat in winter. Open your clothing before you start working, remove a layer, slow down, rest before you are hot rather than after. That instruction sounds like nothing, and it is the single most important thing in this video. Everything else on this list holds your heat. Sweat gives it away faster than anything can hold it. One more that belongs alongside these, and it costs nothing. Cover your head and your neck. A considerable share of heat loss happens from the head and from the large blood vessels running close to the surface at the throat, and both are frequently left uncovered by people who have carefully insulated everywhere else. A wrap at the neck and something over the head does more per ounce of material than anything else you can put on. So there they are. Get 4 inches off the ground. Layer for trapped still air rather than piling weight. Stuff dry material inside your clothing. Build a nest barely larger than your body. Use snow as the insulator it is, with a vent. Go below the frost line, where the earth is 50 degrees. Sleep near other people. Eat fat before you sleep. And never sweat. Not one of those requires a fire. Every one of them keeps working at 3 in the morning when a fire has burned down to nothing. Here is what I keep coming back to. The story usually told is that people simply endured hard winters through toughness, huddled and freezing, with nothing better available. That story is wrong, and it does the old ones a disservice. They were not enduring. They had worked out where heat goes and closed off every route, using materials standing within reach of where they slept. That is engineering, arrived at by watching carefully across a great many generations, and the fact that none of it was written down does not make it less so. Practice one of these in fair weather when nothing is at stake. Build a bed of debris on a Saturday and lie on it. Then lie on the bare ground beside it and feel the difference for yourself. That comparison teaches more in 2 minutes than I can in 20. Tell me down in the comments where your people are from and whether there is a cold weather method in your own family that never made it into a book. I read every one of them. Walk easy out there, and I will see you at the next fire.